Welcome to Viseland, and this is exciting because it's actually our first episode that we've done where there's actual live basketball happening around us. Have you been watching a lot of the games from the restart?
I mean, there was live basketball last time. It just wasn't necessarily like live regular season
Well, it was
basketball.
scrimmage. Like now, they're games that are actually like statistically adding up.
But yes, Jason, I have been watching quite a bit of the restart. It's exciting to see, and looks like the Western Conference, that eight seed could eventually have a playing game. It doesn't look like it'll be the same in the East, but yeah,
Well,
we'll
then
see what happens.
Washington's already lost. Like they're like if
Yeah,
they didn't book a return ticket quickly, like I don't know what they're doing because yeah, they have like no chance.
they get extra games.
But I'm glad like former friend of the program, former Oregon Duck player Troy Brown getting some good burn because
He's
obviously
getting good.
Wall is out, Beal is not there. Like
Did you see that video of John Wall?
yo, he's yeah. Oh,
Yeah. So
athleticism never been a problem for that man.
yeah. Well, I just like it seemed as far as conditioning and everything, like he was
No, he
weight
looked
and
great. Got up on that
to
dunk.
be close to his playing weight, which was something that I think people were possibly concerned about.
Questioning, yeah, no, definitely, and it's been cool to see what's going to lead into the playoffs. Like I'm hoping Portland can edge their way in to the playoffs, but obviously that requires winning, which again not always a strength.
Yeah, well, I was recently on the Trailcasters podcast, and we talked about that, and I did predict that the Blazers would make the playoffs in a play-in game, so they would have to beat, I presume, still Memphis in 2 games, though it's been a rough start for them, and they just lost tonight to New Orleans, so that makes them 0-3 in the bubble. But they still have a couple-game lead on the teams that are in ninth place. But I guess the Blazers now technically in that ninth place spot because San Antonio lost tonight.
Yeah, it's like them in San Antonio.
Yeah, it's a photo finish. I don't think people were really expecting San Antonio to be fighting for that 9th spot, but they've played quite well, and it was a really close loss tonight to Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's just good to it's just good to have these games back under these circumstances. It's just been fun for me just watching certain guys like again, like as an Oregon fan, like Bull is playing in games. He gets a chance to get a little experience and then hopefully be thrown into the rookie award scene next year. Just wishful thinking on my end, but
why would he would be allowed to be a rookie next year?
Yeah, they said like anyone who's making their NBA debut in Orlando is still under consideration for Rookie of the Year in 2021.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if they make the NBA, like because he was in the G League and was never like playing. Yeah,
that seems utterly ridiculous, but sure.
This whole thing is ridiculous, but I mean, like it's just one of the things. But yeah, it's just it's great. It's great games that are on. Let us know in the comments. What games you're watching, what storylines you're excited about in this NBA restart. But yeah, what are we going to be talking about today?
So we are going to be doing what we did a couple weeks ago, except this time with the draft that we had talked about last week, or the drafts that we had talked about last week, which were from 2000 to 2009. We're going to go over the best player in each draft, and if the best player was indeed the number 1 pick, which is not very often in these drafts, then we'll talk about that runner-up. We're going to mostly talk about them as prospects, kind of give a little bit of a career perspective as well, and yeah, just kind of go over who we feel the best picks were in each draft, and give you some idea of the context behind what led them to be drafted where they were, and just kind of give some hindsight as to who the number 1 pick might have been if they were to do a redraft.
Totally. Let's so again, this is not a ranking. We're just going to go year by year. So we're going to start way back in time. We're going back to the year 2000 draft, and I gotta say, every time I look at this draft, it gets worse in my mind. It was a fairly not super strong draft.
You're being way too kind. It was a shitty draft.
Yeah, as far as all-stars are concerned, there are 3 players out of this draft that end up making it.
3 players who are one-time all-stars.
Yeah.
Like that's horrendous. That's really bad.
Mike Miller
And
ends up taking the Rookie of the Year award.
he did.
In
And
a,
like he was fine. Like
in a,
it's not. He ends up being one of the better players in this draft.
yeah, and good
Like
career.
he certainly, like, if you fight for career perspective and everything, like he's among the top players in this draft. The guy who had the longest career out of anybody in this draft is Jamal Crawford.
Still playing.
I think in a redraft is likely a top 5 pick and was, I believe, the 8th pick in that draft.
Still contributing. You know, yeah, but
but yeah, he fantastic career. It's not necessarily what you might expect out of like a top 5 pick in a draft, but he in most drafts would be like a top 10 guy, I think, from career perspective. Yeah, long career for Jamal Crawford. The guy that we feel would have been the number 1 pick if you were to do a redraft, and a lot of the times we'll take, top end performance into account as well. And that's why I think you go with Michael Redd. And Michael Redd was the 43rd pick in the 2000 draft out of Ohio State. Has a good 3 years at Ohio State. I was not as into the draft back then, so my perspective may be a little different, but comes out of the gates like scorching as a freshman on a losing team. I think they go 8-22, and he averages 22 points a game. So immediately, like, he's on the radar. He's doing this in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
The next couple years, they have a good team. They get Scooney Penn, who I believe was some kind of transfer, either junior college or was from somewhere else. But he comes in and plays for them, and they become a pretty formidable team.
Yeah, Scooney Penn came from Boston. I just looked at it. Scooney came from Boston College because I remember they made a Final Four.
Yeah. That was his sophomore year, Red's sophomore year. And the reason behind Michael Redd going as low as he did, at least I feel, is it seems like he didn't have the most exceptional shooting profile at Ohio State. He wasn't an amazing long-range shooter. I think he shot somewhere in like the low 30s from 3. And then his first 2 seasons in college, he's like in the low 60s free throw percentage. That last season, yeah, so he shoots 31.9 for his career. He shoots 34% as a sophomore from 3. So not shooting lights out. Not like he becomes in the NBA.
Yeah,
because
like
eventually he becomes a really knockdown shooter. His junior year in college, he goes from 61.4% as a sophomore to 77.6% from the free throw line. He was always a bucket. And then at the NBA draft combine, I have his measurements here. He has a 27-inch no-step vert, 31-inch max vert, 12.06 lane agility drill, 3.34 three-quarter court. So not very impressive athletic numbers at the NBA combine. And measures pretty well. Like, he's 4.75 without shoes, 214 pounds, 6'9" wingspan, 8'6" standing reach. So, like, solid numbers for a shooting guard, like, or wing in general. I maybe a little smaller if he's playing small forward, but it just seems like athleticism and those must have been the concerns behind Michael Redd at the time. And he has a slow start to his NBA career.
Yeah, like his first year, he comes in, he only plays 6 games, doesn't make any threes.
Yeah.
But then,
I'm guessing there must have been some reason behind that as well.
Also kind of backing up Ray Allen. I think they still had Big Dog at the time on Milwaukee. So he was kind of, like, scoring wasn't really a thing. He only played a few games. So, I mean, there might be some more circumstances for that. But, yeah, like.
Yeah, he comes off the bench those next couple years and is really good. And then by his 4th year in the league, that's when he really takes a star turn.
Yeah, and he just and he was just, and he ends up, playing on. Unfortunately, he kind of, I think he was in the Team USA scene. He was on the Redeem Team, actually. I thought he was on 2000.
Yeah, he was on the Redeem Team.
2006.
So it wasn't unfortunate.
I stand corrected. 2008. So he's on the Redeem Team.
Yeah.
So he's, because he fits a role, especially in that international play, of just like a guy that can shoot.
Yeah. And in his fourth year, he also makes the All NBA third team. And he has a number of good years after that. I think he has like a nice 7-year stretch in Milwaukee where he averages 22 points per game over 477 games and shooting 38% from three. He shoots 38% from three for his career. He's not a guy that you normally would see like being the first pick in a redraft. But in 2000, I think he has the best peak of anybody else. The one other guy who I think, plays a few more years. Yeah, like Kenyon Martin looks honestly pretty fine as the first pick. But the other guy who people might kind of mention just because he had a nice little peak, Hito Turkoglu.
Yeah,
Is another guy who I never makes an all-star team, but that kind of, I don't know. I still feel he's likely definitely better than Jamal McGlure. And you could argue he's better than Kenyon Martin. And yeah, just really solid player. He was 16th pick by Sacramento. He was a guy that at the time, 16-year-old Michael Visenberg had never heard of and was like, who in the hell did Sacramento just choose? But turns out to be a very good player, and definitely he could have gone quite a bit higher in this draft.
Again, earlier days of the internet, and a lot of these things, to know about some of these international guys. But yeah, like just to throw out names of people that were high in this draft, it's like you're talking Stromile Swift number 2, Darius Miles number 3, Marcus Fizer number 4.
Darius Miles has a good rookie year too. Like it seems like he has a number of years after that where he pretty much is on the same kind of wavelength.
No, never took a turn, and then again, injuries, but then
really improve into like the role guy that he eventually became. And then
Mike Miller, you got DeMar Johnson again derailed by injuries. Chris Mim, who's just had one good game on the Lakers when Shaq left, and then you have Jamal Crawford, Joel Prisbilla, Keon Dooling. Like that's your 10 picks. Not a strong team you'd want to like be presenting, or a lot of guys that like people are still talking about. Like these are a lot of names you could bring up today, and a lot of people are
there was not depth at all in that draft, and really kind of a lack of excitement. I was excited as a young person that was kind of just getting into the draft, and that is when NBA Draft.net hit the internet really hard. I feel that was the first draft that I was looking up NBA draft, came across this site. The rest is history, but it's still. Like I said last week, it seems like a number of guys in that draft hit their like floor outcome.
Yeah, and like again, like
Michael Redd was like the rare guy that hit his ceiling.
Yeah, my excitement, for that draft again, it's centered around like I liked Cincinnati earlier in the year with like DeMar, Kenyon Martin, but Kenyon Martin gets hurt, and then. The Flintstones, you got like Mateen Cleaves, Morris Peterson, but again, like those are guys you liked in college, but not knowing, the draft and like what NBA, kind of looks like and like what that transition and difference.
Yeah. I think Mo Pete ended up doing pretty well, but
no, yeah. Mo Pete did well, Mateen Cleaves never really like, materializes as the kind of player that he was kind of in college. But very supportive teammate. He was one of those guys, that was like first guy off the bench, always giving good high fives. So you kind of respect that role. But yeah, overall, the less we can talk about 2000 draft, the better. Because yeah, it is pretty.
Yeah, I was done talking about it like a few minutes ago.
Yeah, but Michael, just great shooter. Good on him. And he's actually, as the 43rd pick, he's actually the lowest picked player that we've done today. So other than this, we're going to be in the top 10, but you're going to notice there's not going to be a lot of number ones.
Yeah.
2001 draft.
And then like we did last time with the other list where we had 4 number 1 players we felt were the best in the draft, we go with the runner-up and give you a little bit of a rundown of them as prospects. So let's move on to 2001 for the love of God. And this is a much more interesting draft. This was the first ever draft that had a high school player chosen as the number 1 pick. It was Kwame Brown. as we talked about last week, and had him 9th in our top 10 number one picks of the decade from 2000 to 2009. Number 2 pick, Tyson Chandler. Number 4 pick, Eddie Curry. Number 3 is the player we feel is the best player in this draft, and that is Pau Gasol. And Pau Gasol,
No question.
it's kind of amazing because he really improves through his like youth basketball career. Like when you go back and look at his youth career, he starts off in like the U16s and he almost seems like a bench player. He's like this guy who has potential. And then by the time he was drafted by Vancouver in 2001, he had really like kind of hit on that. And he plays for FC Barcelona. He, I think, is the MVP of the championship game or the championship series in the ACB, or the Spanish league, like at the time. And he has a really good last year there and was ready to come in and contribute right away. Wins Rookie of the Year. He was just a really good player. It takes him a while to make an all-star team. He does in his 5th season. But yeah, Pau Gasol, like legit 7-footer. I believe even like without shoes. Like the guy's tall, great passer, inside, out, great at the high post.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like when he was on the Lakers in the high post, like when you had kind of like Kobe, Pau in the high post, and you had Bynum down on the block when Bynum was actually like a decent center for a couple of years. Like that was a very formidable triangle.
Absolutely. And, wins 2 championships with the Lakers, has just a number of great NBA seasons, really good NBA career, and has a formidable international career with Spain as well. Winning some Eurobaskets. He silver medal in the 2006 World Championships, and he gold medal. He won the gold medal, but he had I think that was when he had broken his foot, and they win the gold medal game without him, but they still win the gold medel.
No, like I mean, they keep Team USA, some pretty good games. Like once they kind of have their whole team together in Spain.
That was when they beat Greece, or no, they beat Argentina, whatever it was. Yeah, it was something like that. But yeah, he wins gold medal there. They never win gold in the Olympics, but they finish second place twice, I believe.
And well, I think when he comes, when Powell's coming into the league too, it's one of those things again, like we didn't know as much about international guys, and it's like, can they come to the NBA? It's like, yeah, he's a big skilled guy, but does that work in the league? And he proved that from the jump. Like, yes, he was able to play. And then, like when you look at this draft, it's like a lot of these high school guys, like, I mean, they were drafting them on this kind of potential that Kwame didn't have, Eddie Curry didn't have, Tyson Chandler. It took him a while until he kind of, built himself as like a defensive player. Yeah. And that's what kept him, around the league. Did he just retire? Is he still trying to, like, Tyson Chandler?
No, Tyson Chandler's still playing for Houston. Yeah. I would say, and Pau Gasol just signed back in Spain too. So he's going to be playing there now.
Once he recovers, because I know he was hurt. That's what the Blazers let him go. But yeah, so he's planning to still play. I will say that, there was this guy named Dirk Nowitzki who had been drafted a little bit before, who was doing pretty well. So different, like a little different skill sets between Pau and
yeah, definitely different skill sets. But yeah, it certainly seems like Pau, while he went 3rd in the draft, like it seems like and this could be hindsight, but it seems like he was at least among the names of like the top guys in this draft, especially like going over the guy who was number 1 in the RSCI, which was Eddie Curry. And yeah, like as good as Kwame Brown and Tyson Chandler were as prospects, it seems like Pau Gasol was somebody who could have been on their level. I just kind of wonder what the Wizards' perspective was then, and I certainly don't know. But yeah, it seems like it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that Pau
Well,
Gasol
you think like Michael Jordan would want to play with Pau Gasol, like a guy like that is a good, a good teammate. You think Michael Jordan would want that?
Oh, absolutely. I just wonder if they honestly just didn't they thought he would take a long time, and even back then while we were at the point where Kobe Bryant and Kevin Garnett had already made all-star teams at this point, they still high school guys were going to take a little while to get into the league, and I think maybe they were wondering that with Pau as well. And he was seen as I the thing with Pau Gasol that people would complain about is him being, at the time he was skinnier than he ended up being, and then they said he was soft. And I have to say, to me, he always got a lot of offensive rebounds. I think the soft label was kind of an oversell.
No, totally. Because
yeah.
I think he proved himself to be a pretty tough player. And then, yeah, looking at this draft, I remember going into it, everyone obviously, Shane Battier was the proven college guy. And I remember, I think Charles Barkley on draft night was saying, this is the best player in this draft.
And he was a really good role player.
Yeah, good role player.
Pau was the best player in the draft.
No, ends up playing, good career. Pau, definitely the best. You got Joe Johnson a little bit later, still out.
Well, the guy who I feel would be best after Pau Gasol is the guy who is the last pick in the first round, and one of the reasons, the cornerstones of San Antonio's dynasty, Tony Parker.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I would go Pau, Tony, and then when you're looking at peaks, maybe Gilbert Arenas really hits that.
Great peak.
Joe Johnson has a decent peak too. Zach Randolph, becomes a staple of Memphis. Yeah. This was a pretty surprisingly solid draft. It took some time to kind of work itself, because Pau out the gates was good. Tyson Chandler took a little bit of time to develop.
Definitely.
Joe Johnson as well. Jared Wallace ends up making an all-star team, but
yeah. How many all-stars from this draft?
So you got Tyson Chandler, Pau Gasol, Joe Johnson, Zach Randolph, Gerald Wallace, Tony Parker, Gilbert Arenas, and Mehmet Okur in the second round.
8 all-stars. That's not bad.
And this was a draft that was littered with Arizona people as well. They had a good tournament run, so you got
no real franchise players, but definitely guys that helped franchises win championships, and that absolutely symbolized by Pau Gasol and Tony Parker.
Yeah, no, definite.
And even Tyson Chandler in 2011, a huge part of Dallas winning, as we said as well last week. Let's move on to the 2002 NBA draft. You and I had a bit of a disagreement here, in that you were saying you feel Yao Ming should have been still would have been the number 1 pick in a redraft.
Yeah, I think the case I have for Yao is again, injury shortened, but his peak was there, and I mean he had so much.
I think Amari's peak was better. I'll be honest.
So
it was pretty close, but you know how I was saying Yao Ming never made the All NBA first team. I think the reason he never made the All NBA first team is that Amari made it over him.
I think in that rookie year, I think Amari had a dunk on him too, if I recall, and
But well, that's the reason that he's.
That's not the reason. But I just like
Amari wins Rookie of the Year. Yeah, yeah. Amari makes that one-time All NBA first team, and he has a nice long peak. He gets hurt as well and has some injury issues, but he also definitely was on a more cohesive team, but he was they were really close to getting to that NBA Finals to possibly win that championship as well. And I feel he was a huge reason. And
that was a great pick and roll between he and Steve Nash in Phoenix. What they
and just for a while you just couldn't stop him.
Yeah.
He had all these other ways of scoring as well. He had a really really good offensive repertoire. His defense was an issue also, but yeah. So he was never like a great defender, but yeah. I just want to give some Amare combine info from before the 2002 draft. He's 6'8.5" without shoes, 233 pounds, 7'1" 3/4 wingspan, 9'1" standing reach. So, it's 90.5 standing reach. 32 no step vert, which is really good for a big guy. 35.5 max vert. So he hits the 12-foot mark, I guess, clears the vertex and then gets nowhere above that.
Yeah. What can you do after that?
11.19 lane agility, which is, I think, pretty solid considering he was a big guy, and 3.25 3/4 court sprint, which is, again, really good. I was a little surprised he went as low as he did. Like, if you were to count even the year before, some people talked about Amare Stoudemire like possibly entering as like a junior in high school.
Well, physically, he was he was already developed. Like, that was the thing for him. Like, he didn't need to come into the league and get bigger. Like, he was already a pretty good size, athleticism person.
Yeah. Well, he's 20 during his rookie year too. So yeah, that was, I guess he like technically could have done that. And then I honestly wonder if he wouldn't have been at least like on the short list of guys who could have gone number 1 that year before.
Look at him,
he was considered. I honestly, this may be hindsight as well, but my memory is pretty decent, and I just remember him being considered possibly the best prospect in high school outside of that next draft. But when you talk about like the senior and junior classes together, like I remember he was at least in that short group of players, just because of his immense offensive potential.
Yeah, and this is another one of those drafts too, when like you look at it and you're like, it really falls off a little quick. Like, not the deepest draft either. Like Yao. So like all-star guys, you got Yao, Amare, Caron Butler, Carlos Boozer.
Yeah. And then you have a guy like Nene who has a long career.
Oh, Nene had a long career. You got Jay Williams again, like injuries.
Oh, yeah.
You got Dunleavy, who has a long career, but like doesn't really ever do anything of note. Same thing for like Drew Gooden, Skidgevili. The one where
a good late guy was Tayshaun Prince too.
Yeah, Tayshaun Prince had a good role and had a good, was a pretty good part of that Detroit team. But yeah, other like it. I mean, DeJuan.
Let's stick to the best.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the best. So Amare Stoudemire, yeah, he was went to Cypress Creek High School in Orlando. He I was a little surprised. Like it seemed like he was seen as being like possibly like a top 5 guy, and he goes a little bit later than one expects. Immediate contribution in the NBA as well. I think Phoenix makes the playoffs during that first.
Yeah, they made the playoffs that year.
Yeah, and he wins Rookie of the Year.
Yeah,
and was he? I think he was the first ever high school player to win Rookie of the Year as well.
Yeah, he was. Because Garnett, Kobe, obviously no one wanted that. Powell won it that year before.
Yeah, and then has a number of years where he's seen as one of the better bigs in the NBA. Is a huge reason why Phoenix is as formidable as they are during their little swing of 7 seconds or less basketball.
In that rookie year too, it's like Marbury's the point guard.
Yeah.
It's still pre-Steve
That's
Nash.
how good Amare Stoudemire was.
Yeah, you got Marbury, you got Sean Marion.
The playoffs with Marbury running the show. No,
yeah, and you got Penny.
That obviously was great.
Kind of on the way out. But yeah, it's pretty funny when you think, because you think about, Amare and Nash so much, but you're like, he had Marbury for a good minute there.
Yeah. And so I think when you take career into account and the injuries, obviously, Yao had a really, really good peak. I think Amare's was a little bit better. And then when you take like yeah, just durability and everything. That's why I give it to Amari Stoudemire.
Well, if you want to talk durability, I guess I'll give you this for Amari. He is still playing. He's been playing in Israel since 2016.
Won the title with Maccabi.
They just won the Israel Cup there. So, he's still out there doing it, which is, it's cool to see, guys still playing, like love of the game and just, wanting to win that championship. But yeah, he was
an assistant coach in the Maccabi games too for Canada. The more you know.
Yeah. Hey, he counts himself as Israeli now, so more power to him.
Great athlete. He certainly seemed to have an NBA ready body at the time. He was always like, they mentioned he had like a 31-inch like waist, which is just insane. But yeah, tall, slim man who
built.
Yeah, long legs, high hips, but he got it done. He was really good. And let's move on to 2003. The best player in this draft, surprisingly, is LeBron James.
LeBron James, yeah. I don't know if
known fact.
Anyone picked that up last week. So we'll skip LeBron because LeBron was, in another strata.
We're just saying, they're honestly like there's a large gap between LeBron and the next player. And if you want to argue that's not the case, then I think you're wrong. But the guy who is the second best player in the draft
even made that argument was pretty short.
Yeah. Well, I think early in their career you could have possibly made it, but again would have been wrong. But
yeah, but I think LeBron turns this corner that nobody it's so hard for someone to get to. But this
not to mention these guys played together, and I think the thing with this guy is when you talk about the top two players in this draft, you've got LeBron, and then you have this guy, and he's like a top 25, possibly even top 20 player of all time.
Totally good.
One of the best shooting guards in NBA history. We're talking about Dwayne Wade.
This is a great draft. Yeah, really, really competitive.
Draft. At the top of the draft, yeah. The top 5 picks, minus Darko, really freaking good.
Yeah.
And then I think you would probably go David West at 5 if you were to do a redraft, and then it kind of slips a little bit after that. But yeah, so I think early on people kind of thought Melo was maybe in the second slot. I know a lot of people said, what if Detroit had drafted Melo? Then, for fit, what if they had drafted Bosch? It turns out if they had drafted this guy, I think they'd be in a really great position.
Yeah. I think that would have helped them kind of bridge the gap, because after they traded away Chauncey and Rip, they kind of.
Though I argue that them drafting Darko might have facilitated them making that Rasheed Wallace trade. But I could be lying, and they could have made it anyway, and then have a much better player in there. Who knows?
Yeah. Well.
But yeah. So let's talk Dwayne Wade as a prospect, and. Oh my God! I did not realize Dwayne Wade had. Look, I knew he had a good rookie year, but yeah, he had a really good rookie year.
He had a really strong year, unexpectedly for the Heat too, because I don't think the Heat were doing too much at that point. I think they were kind of in this perpetual place, of the lottery.
Yeah.
But Dwayne Wade was one of those guys. I didn't really know anything about him until that tournament.
But he had a great year the year before at Marquette too. So he had 2 really strong years at Marquette. They had just talked about this guy. You want to hear Dwayne Wade's measurements? They're freaky. So Dwayne Wade, 6'3" and 3/4 without shoes. That I was a little surprised about, because I always had heard he was 6'3" and 3/4 with shoes. But yeah, I guess maybe a legit. At least 6'4"-ish, 212 pounds, 6'10" and 3/4 wingspan. So he has a +7 wingspan and 8'6" standing reach. So even if you thought he was a small shooting guard, he wasn't.
I think,
he was fine. The size was fine. The athleticism stuff, so he doesn't jump out of this world, but he still close to he had, I think, a 35-inch max vert, 31.5 no step, so pretty explosive. 3.08 three-quarter court sprint, which is really fast.
Yeah.
And then he does a lane agility in 10.56, which, like, lateral ability, obviously a huge strength of his. And yeah, so his athleticism is freaky, even if his, like, doesn't post this like 40-inch vert. It seemed not to matter. The energy
he was never the greatest three-point shooter either. Like, I mean, that was never.
No. And it was honestly like, he wasn't. So the first 4 picks in this draft were pretty obvious. The 5th pick wasn't necessarily obvious at the time. Like, you look back now and, like, you're like, oh my God, how could it have been anybody other than Dwayne Wade? At the time, he was slotted like around that range, but like you could have had like Kirk Heinrich or like TJ Ford or somebody else go to Miami. Like Miami could have taken somebody else and you would not have been surprised at the time.
Oh no,
so
TJ
to provide
Ford was
context,
a commodity point guard at the time, you know, like probably like best pure point guard in college at that moment. Kirk Heinrich, you know, has a great tournament. Kansas, obviously. Like again, Dwayne Wade.
They're both high picks. Like, yeah.
Dwayne Wade, yeah, it was like really that tournament for me that put him on my map of like who is this guy?
Yeah. And yeah, who goes right after him? It's
Chris Kaman.
Oh yeah, Kaman.
Kirk Heinrich, TJ Ford,
Mike Sweetney. Wow. All right.
Nick Collison has a good year for Kansas, but obviously Melo's the other, you know, right there with Dwayne. You know, it's like, yeah, it's this draft that's like LeBron, he's up on this pedestal by himself, and then you kind of have Dwayne Wade's like a little bump down, and then you got like Melo and Bosh.
Yeah. And then as like during the rookie season, the rookie of the year fight is between LeBron and Melo. Dwayne Wade has a really good rookie year. And then this is when Shaq is looking to be traded somewhere, and the Shaq-Kobe riff had gotten to that point. And he sees this guy in Miami, and he goes, I think I can win with this guy. So he okays the trade to Miami. The first year, they get to the conference finals. They lose in that conference finals. 2006, Dwayne Wade has an incredible playoffs. And against Detroit, I just remember that conference finals, like unreal. And then has that amazing series against Dallas where he went to the free throw line.
And again,
I think maybe like he went to the free throw line, like I may be low here, 600 times in that series.
Like if you rewatch it, it seems like it. No, like
but he was amazing. Like he just could constantly break down the defense, get to the paint. This dynamic driver, and you know, has the mid-range game as well. But yeah, he was able to manipulate defense, and he was the guy that, you know, really got them to that point. And Shaq certainly helped matters. They have some really good role players on that team also. But yeah, so he wins that ring in 2006. The rest of his career, he's among the top shooting guards year in, year out, at least in the MVP conversation for a number of years, and is seen as one of the better players in the NBA. Wins a couple more rings with the Miami Heat. Once LeBron James and Chris Bosh come to town, and ends up being like, you know, you go Jordan, Kobe. A number of people put Dwayne Wade like third after them. James Harden certainly entering that conversation. Yeah. It depends where you consider Jerry West, but I think, you know, Dwayne Wade probably surpassed him as well. Yeah, I think he may indeed be the third best shooting guard of all time.
No, he's also, again, like one of the most recognizable faces too of basketball on and off the court too. Like he's the kind of person that you could talk to somebody like who doesn't know anything about basketball and be like, Dwayne Wade, they're like, oh yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, he's a big deal.
Yeah, like
and
you know, he had a great career, and like you know, actually like him on TNT now. So I think he's doing well. And then yeah, like Melo and Bosh are that next bump down, but yeah, Wade is still above them because yeah, Bosh unfortunately like couldn't really do it on his on his own, but again, a great, kind of stretch big guy.
Yeah.
And then Melo, just a great scorer, but unfortunately, just like defense and teams just never able to like go over the hump until, of course, now that he's on the Blazers, they'll go win a championship and that'll cement his legacy. But
yeah, the Melo Blazers rebuild, it's happening.
they'll let him wear a hoodie in the game in the finals. It'll be Hoodie Melo, the most unstoppable player out there. But yeah, so moving on from 2003, we go to 2004, and this was like a high school explosion draft.
Indeed.
A lot of high school guys. We talked about the number one pick. And honestly, as much as I don't care for him on a lot of levels, Dwight Howard is the best player from this draft. But since he was the number one pick, we talked about him. Let's move on to the second best player. And who do we think that is?
It's a little bit of a surprise and kind of shows that this draft isn't necessarily too top heavy. I think a lot of good role players come out of this draft, and this guy is like the really good role player, and it's Andre Iguodala.
I think he's the role player to the
runner-up.
To the definition of like in the dictionary, like he's a role player who won a Finals MVP, like Finals MVP.
Yeah, like rare top defensive qualities at the wing, and
he has his all-star year.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about like basketball acumen in general, but yeah. Let's talk about Andre as a prospect. Has like a solid freshman year at Arizona, like nothing that stands out too much, but you could see that, he can handle, he can pass, and just the defensive ability and athleticism, very rare. Physical attributes as well. Like, so we're talking about Dwayne Wade. Andre, if we're talking about like, so he's 6'5" and 3/4 without shoes, 217. This is after his sophomore season at Arizona. 6'11" wingspan, 8'9.5" standing reach. Jesus. Like, so the guy has like legit wing size. And he he's never like an outstanding offensive or individual offensive player in Arizona. I think there were questions about him shooting, but the athleticism was like really real. He 30.5-inch no step, 34.5 max, 11.17 lane agility, 3.18 3/4 court, all really good numbers. I was looking just at that draft, and like I'd say the top 7 guys, it's not like super surprising any of those went over him. The 8th guy, I think, yeah. And this, like, hindsight, obviously 2020, but like, so this is I think a highlight of the Raptors, like, flat out ineptitude at this time.
No, totally. And this is like it's a pick that literally like makes Vince Carter be like, I'm out.
Oh yeah. Well, like it was just like, so the guy that they take the year before is Chris Bosh. Good pick. Like, yes, Dwayne Wade ends up being a better player, but still, like, nobody hates on the Chris Bosh pick. The guy they take that year after, so Antonio Davis is gone. They need a center. Like, yeah, like they could use some help at big. Like, at the time, Chris Bosh wasn't necessarily considered a center.
No, totally. You need someone like a little bigger.
Yeah, but they needed a lot. Like, it wasn't just like they needed one plug and play. Like, they had the 8th pick in the draft for a reason. And this center, and like we said, hindsight 2020, but so Chris Bosh is 20 during this year. This center is 24. They drafted a guy who turns 24 as a rookie. BYU guy. His name, Rafael Hoffa Rougeau. And then that next pick is Andre Iguodala. Not to mention, like, all the other guys, like Al Jefferson gets picked a little bit later. Josh Smith, J.R. Smith. Like, there are lots of guys you could probably point to later on.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was definitely.
Yeah, and it wasn't like Hoffa wasn't like a solid college player, but the age thing, like, and that wasn't necessarily, I guess that wasn't seen as big of a deal, and like they didn't necessarily look at that lining up, and yeah, I just don't really know. I don't really know. But yeah, Andre Iguodala seemed to be one of those guys who, you could at least see playing defense and being a secondary playmaker for you. And he eventually becomes a little bit better at shooting too. Though the amazing thing is when he wins Finals MVP, he shoots like 31% from like the free throw line during that final series too. It was crazy.
Yeah, I think for the
Bill was very valuable.
Yeah, it's just overall
LeBron
contribution.
James was fantastic. LeBron like puts up huge numbers, but not at the greatest efficiency during that series. And yeah, like neck and neck between Andre and Steph Curry for Finals MVP. Andre ends up taking it. And yeah, just he's never like a double figure scorer again when he's with the Warriors. But the thing that he provides is like the fact that he can do just about everything on the basketball court.
Yeah, like a little bit
and
of everything.
That is part of this lineup that is known as the death lineup, that is one of the best basketball like lineups in basketball history, and over like a 5-year, 6-year stretch, just this incredible lineup where they can play small with Draymond at the 5, and then once you bring in Kevin Durant, you're not really playing small, but
yeah, you're not playing small.
Nonetheless,
Yeah,
not in the truest sense of the word, but playing small. And yeah, so Andre, still, it's just surprised. Like I was a little surprised he went as low as he did in the draft, but it wasn't like this infinitely shocking thing.
I think the guys ahead of him, other than Arujo at the time, like were all guys like
like Josh Childress, you saw like some upside there at Stanford.
Absolutely, he was a very, very like well-rounded player. Josh Childress at the time, in college, like there's a lot of things he did well. You get Emeka Okafor. Obviously,
Emeka was like obviously going 1 or 2. Like
Ben Gordon had this really good scoring ability.
Yeah. Sean Livingston was the second best player, seen as the second best player in that high school class. Devin Harris, like out of Wisconsin, was considered like really solid guard prospect, great athlete. Luol Deng, solid player. Like honestly, if you want to talk about like peaks, like Luol Deng makes 2 All-Star games. I just feel like Andre's had a better career and like maybe gives you a little bit more of that.
I think Andre's done a little bit more like
better, slightly better defender, a little more playmaking. Not quite like the individual offensive player. Though like Andre had some good individual offensive years with Philly. And
when it became
improved there.
He had a couple put together those, and then just the ability to get into Golden State and just become what he did is what's always going to like make his legacy. And it's interesting to think about him too, because it's like he did win that Finals MVP, but is he a Hall of Fame player?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he gets the nod to be in it. I think he's done enough, but it's one of those things where he's kind of on that fringe. It's like kind of a little interesting.
Yeah,
I hope he makes it.
I think Andre makes it, but that's me. And I was looking at
a lot of guys from that draft like still playing today.
So let's move on to Chris Paul, who we talked about last week, being the best player in that draft. He was the best player in that draft by a landslide.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where he gave you that in college too. Like you knew this. Like this was the best.
Yeah.
Point guard. The best player.
He was good, like it, and the guys that went in front, like Marvin Williams, had really good physical attributes. He shot well in college on a small sample size.
Well, he was potential.
He was potential. And Andrew Bogut has a really good year. Darren Williams has a really good year, and they make the finals. And the difference between Chris Paul and Darren Williams is, like size is a huge thing there. And Darren Williams just much bigger. So I think maybe the major concern with Chris Paul. Like he measures at 5'11 3/4 without shoes. Only like a 7'9" standing reach. I wonder how real that was. I think like a 6'4" or so wingspan. But yeah, like I guess people maybe saw Chris Paul as tiny and didn't necessarily think he would do the things he was doing.
I've had the privilege to meet both of them in person at different points of my life, and
Oh,
I will say this:
much more opposing than the other.
Yeah, like Derek Williams is looks like a big, point guard, whereas like Chris Paul looks like a lot of other people you see walking around the streets. He's not exactly like super tall or defined, but he's just so quick and such a great leader that he's still doing it. Like
He's a basketball genius.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. He's a basketball genius. He has
he's on is a good team.
Like he has this. His handle is impeccable. He's an incredible decision maker, and like you just give him the keys to your offense, and he's going to make you a good offense.
Well, it's almost 10 years later, and Laker fans are still crying about the fact that they didn't get Chris Paul. And even though they have LeBron and Anthony Davis and all these great things that have happened to them, but they're still like, we could have Chris Paul. That's what kind of player he is.
I think that's just like them kind of losing hindsight and everything. I always wondered how that you would have gotten the best player out of that trade by far, but like they gave up so much to get him like in that deal. I don't know. I didn't know how that was all going to work with like the contract situation and everything there. Albeit like Kobe and Chris Paul, something good.
Cool. But you know what Chris Paul ends up doing is he, again, that trade goes back. They trade him to the Clippers. He actually makes the Clippers a presentable, decent team in the NBA.
Yes.
He gives them a reputation. Culture.
Yeah.
Like that's remarkable.
Yeah. And at Wake Forest, he was great both years. And I was a little surprised he didn't come out after that first season at Wake Forest. He certainly was like there are a few players in like the drafts at this point where it's so rare when a player of that quality would stay another year. And yeah, Chris Paul, like I don't know how much he really like improved his stock or anything. It just seemed like maybe he just felt like he had things to work on and wanted to be there another year. They have a really good team that year and then lose early in the end.
Super early in the tournament when everyone had them high in their bracket. Yeah, that was a frustrating thing for like 95% of the college basketball watching population at the time. And like in this draft, like as far as like Chris Paul was so good, but Deron Williams, like that Illinois team had come on. They had a great season. Deep.
And he has kind of a slow rookie year and then like really ramps it up. Deron Williams. Chris Paul wins rookie of the year. And then has been like, you can even argue in 2007, 2008, he like might have had an argument to win MVP. Certainly like seemed to. That was the year Kobe won his one and only MVP. Chris Paul was tremendous that season. He was really, really good and has been so good in so many other seasons. One of the all-time NBA assist leaders. Great shooter, like from so many different spots on the floor, can finish at the basket. Like the guy just plays so far beyond his size. And he's like one of the greatest shows in the NBA for the past number of years. It was like we were saying with the last pick, like it wasn't necessarily like a surprise, but he certainly could have gone higher.
Yeah. It's tough because like at the time, like those guys were also highly well thought of as well. But yeah, it's just like interesting to see like the next three picks after him. You got Raymond Felton, Martell Webster, Charlie V.
Yeah. I don't think like Chris Paul has ever been seen as like this athletic like freak or anything like that. But he's like body control. I always thought like just in terms of quickness and speed and even like the guy has some vertical pop for his size too.
Yeah,
like, he was always an impressive athlete to me.
Yeah, it's winning characteristics.
NBA athleticism, I don't think was an issue with him. It was just, I think, seen as size because like 7'9" standing reach is tiny, And if that's really his standing reach, like that is tiny, but it has not mattered one damn bit.
No.
So yeah, Chris Paul is the guy who's just so freaking skilled at basketball that he has really transcended any size concerns that he had at the time.
And if he wasn't good at basketball, he's insured by State Farm. They're taking really good care of him and his brother Cliff.
If he wasn't good at basketball, he probably wouldn't be insured by State Farm. That's
Probably not. But now he's probably got a really good policy. If he did become bad, they would have his back.
If the Monstars took his
powers, he'd be very well insured.
Sure. And then his son would just do the commercials. Fantastic.
2006 draft is one of these drafts that again, it can be slightly painful to really take a deep dive and look at.
Yeah. See, again, you're being nice. It's a pile of shit. It's not a good draft.
Pretty good.
It was set up to be that way because that's when they finally inserted the age limit. And of course, they had to do it when the Toronto Raptors finally get the first.
Yeah, the first pick. Yeah, you hold out. Greg Oden, Kevin Durant.
This potential franchise center, and then this amazing, like, insane sized wing forward prospect. Like, let's be real. Greg Oden would have been the first pick in the draft. Again, he would have been, if Greg Oden had entered the NBA draft out of high school in 2006, he would have been the first pick.
Yeah, he's a big.
Could be a flash forward to a future episode that we do.
But the best player, does go pretty high in this steaming pile of a draft. So it's not the first pick, which is Andre Bargnani, which
steaming
again,
pile of draft.
We talked about being very disappointing as a player, in a lot of ways, especially defensively. Second player, again, not a defensive stalwart, but he, improved.
That's certainly better than
Bargnani. LaMarcus Aldridge.
Yeah.
Who has established himself as a go-to guy, in Portland, go-to guy when he made the move to San Antonio to kind of take that next generation of San Antonio. He's just a great post player. He's got that kind of high release that I think, always kind of like sets him up for like pretty good opportunities.
Yeah.
And he's just, he'll go down as the best player in this draft. Like when I really look at it, it's like my heart wants Brandon Roy so badly, but those are just, those injuries.
I think early on in the draft, everybody was thinking.
Yeah. If Brandon Roy got to have the career that, even like half the career he deserved, an 8-9 year consistency.
Yeah.
No questions asked. Brandon Roy.
Yeah. Early on, there was no question who the better player was between these two guys. LaMarcus he's been really solid. And I think that's kind of what you take in this draft. He's had some seasons where he's certainly been among the best big men in the league. He's had a lot of seasons where he's played on really good teams also and been a huge part of that. There were just like a few games a few years ago. Remember those early games against Oklahoma City? Where he just like went to town. Like he was just going crazy.
He can't do that. Like he's got that, and he's got a decent mid-range, but yeah, just like his
great skill set. Yeah.
His high release was always something that was.
And then like, he makes him a good clip. Like, he's a legitimately good shooter.
Yeah, no, totally. And he's had that mid-range before, the mid-range. Because when he came in the league, like that wasn't necessarily like a necessity. Like Bosch and a couple other guys were kind of stretching out. But yeah, no, he had some great years for the Blazers, and still playing well in San Antonio. Made 7 All-Star teams.
Yeah. So with the huge amount of players that went to the NBA draft in 2004, LaMarcus was actually the top-rated high school guy in the NCAA his freshman year. And has like a pretty solid freshman year. I think it would have been probably good enough to leave early, but I think he made the right move at least for him and came back and it definitely improved his draft stock. There was like little to no way he was going to go lower than like 5 in this draft and ends up going 2
to the
taken by Chicago.
Yeah,
and traded. It was the guy Portland wanted. And I guess Chicago figured that out and said, we want Tyrese Thomas. They get a little bit extra. I think Victor Kriapa, like,
What
great. Great.
if you're giving me Tyrus Thomas, you can throw in a couple other things as well. Like at the time, it was a frustrating draft to watch for the Blazers because they kept making all these trades. Like they couldn't just draft anybody. They had to like.
I don't think it was frustrating. I think it was frustrating just to like Stephen A. Smith. Like,
Yeah, no, but like,
to me, like they got two legitimately good players. Like even at the time, like there was some excitement behind Randy Foye, but Brandon Roy was like, I'll be honest with you, Brandon Roy his senior year, like knocked my socks off.
oh great,
Like, the guy was so damn good. I was lucky enough. I saw Brandon Roy play every year in college.
Yeah, when he came to Eugene, like I mean, that was like a
clinic. By the time he was a senior, like he was doing whatever he wanted.
Yeah, he was putting on a clinic, like against the Ducks, like at the game that I was at. Like, we had good guards at the time, but he was great. It's funny, you look at this draft again, like Randy Foye, he's the 7th pick.
Turns out a different guy from his school ends up being, I think, the one guy who's in contention, if you want to talk about career, with LaMarcus Aldridge, and that's Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, and Kyle Lowry, again, physically doesn't jump off the board at you because he is a smaller point guard. He's stout.
They didn't think he could shoot. And for a number of years in the NBA, it didn't look like it looked like their scouting report was right. Like this great defensive presence, really helps your team.
Tough.
Really good role guy. The shooting click that Kyle Lowry eventually gets later on in his NBA career, where he's become this perennial all-star and then is a crucial element of a championship team last season. That came later. That came later, and now he's just ridiculous. He just shoots from everywhere. So yeah, that wasn't something that you necessarily saw coming. And Kyle Lowry
totally took some time.
Is the 24th pick by Memphis. I think Memphis gives up on him like a little bit early. You also hear he's not necessarily like the easiest guy to work with and things like that, but I think that improves a great deal, and goes to Houston, gets traded to Toronto. And in the beginning in Toronto, like people were kind of wondering how it was going to go, and then he eventually like just flips the switch and gets it all together. And,
heart and soul of the franchise, really.
Yeah, he's been one of the best point guards in the league for quite a while. I feel like the Raptors overachieved, if anything, for a number of years, and then they get Kawhi Leonard, and Kyle's a crucial element. He does so many things that don't get brought up in like a box score stat. I still feel like LaMarcus, like just with making the All NBA teams and like his peak, maybe a little bit higher, but I can understand it being like a question of which one you would want more, and who you feel gives your team like a better chance of winning. And I still take LaMarcus Aldridge as number one in a redraft, but Kyle Lowry made it interesting. The other guy that you may like think about, and I feel like it's like LaMarcus, Kyle, and then this guy would be next is Paul Millsap.
Millsap's had a solid
was
career.
Like a steal in this draft too. He goes in the second round. So like Utah gets like this amazing like power forward point guard duo just off of the draft. Like they draft a point guard really high, and then they get this power forward, and he ends up being like much better than they would have expected. And
still doing good things in the league to this day.
Yeah.
Which you can't say for a lot of guys. Like you're looking at these drafts.
Like improves like a great deal too.
Like these drafts, like some of them, it's 10 plus years ago, but you look at some of these, there's a lot of guys that are still out there at a very high level. Yeah. So it's interesting to see, all those guys that have kind of faded away with it. But yeah, overall, pretty not great draft. Let's move on to the next draft, 2007, controversial draft for us. We've discussed it like numerous times on the podcast. It was a lot of family controversy at the time. Our grandmother was very pro Kevin Durant. Michael Visenberg, on the other hand, very pro Greg Oden.
you can also shut your face because you were pro Greg Oden too.
I was
So shut
that's a
your
lie.
face,
Yeah, like,
and it's always convenient. It's
but
just
you took your fandom to another level. I like kind of was able to kind of like anonymously go about my business, but you're always sticking up for Greg.
sounds good, cable guy. But either way, a lot of people will forget that Kevin Durant wasn't actually the first pick in this draft. So we'll just exclusively talk about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant has excellent freshman year at Texas, and I thought it was kind of an interesting like decision to go to Texas. They still make the NCAA tournament. They lose really early on, and they have like I felt like kind of like a mediocre year. They weren't necessarily like the best team. They have DJ Augustine as well, and like he was a freshman. They have some other intriguing prospects. I was hoping Kevin Durant would go to North Carolina because that was rumored to be one of his finalists as well. And like I thought during 2007 they had a chance to possibly win it all. But yeah, he goes to Texas and he's really like the guy, and he's a first team All-American. Like I am not sure if he wins like College Player of the Year or anything like that, but he certainly was in the running.
I think he was the most exciting player in college that season.
He was certainly the most unique.
Greg Oden, was hurt. He had that wrist injury, but was like a dominant center. So like, like in hindsight, yes, of course, yeah, Kevin Durant, blah blah blah. But like at the time, you could see why Greg Oden would be high on a board. I mean, he probably could have been the number one pick the year before if he had.
And then we talked about like strength concerns with Kevin Durant. He measures it like, I think like 6'9" without shoes. Has
no reps of the bench
4
press.
3/4 wingspan. Yeah, does 0 bench press reps of 185.
Which again, if you have to
only weighs 215 pounds. The long arms certainly don't.
Yeah, if you have to put it up at his arms, I mean that's tough. Like at my arm height, he should be able to do it. But yeah.
The long arms certainly don't help. But yeah, people worried about it, and he also wasn't seen as like this guy who was this incredible like playmaker. I think his defense was seen as good, but people worried about that as well. Like just with him adding weight, but he moved so well. He moved well. He takes he has a number of plays. Like his isolation load at Texas was really high. He's a great shooter off of
those guys were, I think he probably grew.
He's this crazy shooting prospect as like a guy who has like big man size.
Yeah, and I think he grew like from when he was, he's like was he 6'9"? Was he 6'11"?
Yeah. You almost wonder if he just said like just mark me at 6'9".
Yeah, like he's one of those guys
because he has like center size.
Yeah,
and other than the weight, but yeah, he obviously gets better there. And then his rookie year, they're not a good team, but he wins rookie of the year. He averages 20 a game, and it's pretty hard to hold him under 20 a game. The guy is like a walking matchup nightmare, and he just gets better from there. So his first 2 years in the league, his team sucks, but he's putting up good numbers. And then he gets 2 players who are like among the best players in their draft too.
Yeah,
they hit on these 3 picks in a row, and then Serge Ibaka is in there as well. And Serge Ibaka, probably the reason that they feel they can't pay all of these guys, and the reason why one of them eventually gets traded.
But it was such a good string of drafts that they really did.
It was amazing.
That team
they had this string of drafts, and like Kevin Durant was obviously he was an obvious pick. Jeff Green goes 5. They trade with Boston for 5 and get Jeff Green, and you probably could have had a better player than Jeff Green in this draft. Certainly was fine. But yeah, let's say take Joakim Noah or somebody like that. But yeah, so Kevin Durant was like an obvious one, and then let's just move immediately to the next guy who wasn't an obvious one, and then ends up being the best player in his draft, and that's Russell Westbrook. And we're talking the 2008 draft. You have these 3 guys at the top. The number one pick, as we discussed last week, was between Derrick Rose and Michael Beasley. Those guys were going 1-2, I think, no matter what. And there was maybe a little talk of Miami being interested in OJ Mayo. That doesn't end up happening. OJ Mayo does go 3. And then I think 4 was pretty much the highest Russell Westbrook would have gone in this draft. And Sam Presti sees something in this guy. And they take him. He has a really good rookie year. And so his freshman year at UCLA, he was kind of almost an afterthought. He had this amazing basketball body, long arms, just super wide, really fast, NBA level athlete. Not the best shooter, but he has something. He has something.
And yeah, Darren Collison was kind of the point guard on UCLA. This Russell Westbrook kid, is he a point guard? Is he a shooter?
Yeah, they saw him as kind of like a combo guy. But he averages 4.3 assists. Has a good assist to turnover ratio. Not even his shooting wasn't crazy bad. So his freshman year, he only plays 9 minutes per game. And 55% from the line, obviously on a pretty low sample size. That next year, he's 71.3% from the line, 33.8% from 3. And really comes on as the year progresses. And as I said last week in the Final Four, he has a really good game against Memphis when they eventually lose.
I remember going to see him. This is right when I actually moved to Los Angeles, and I went to UCLA. Oregon was in town, so I was going to root on my Ducks.
Yeah.
And Russell Westbrook tears him a new one.
Yeah.
And had literally one of the more embarrassing dunks I've ever seen performed in a game. And just he's got that athleticism that just hurts your spirits as an opposing player when those things are performed on you. And just his ability to get to that 5th gear so quickly and so easily.
Yeah.
I think that's what helped, has propelled him in the NBA. It's just he plays fast and faster. Those are the 2 levels he plays at.
Yeah. His rebounding for a guard was always as soon as he came into the NBA, his rebounding for a guard is just so stupid. He's just has, it seems to have no, and he was an Iron Man those first few years too. He barely ever missed a game. So I know he's had a few injuries here and there, but it's just kind of amazing how durable he's been.
When it's the kind of guy when you meet him, he's like a tight end. He's a big dude.
He's amazingly imposing when you meet him in person because he's so wide. That's the thing. His shoulders are just so wide, and he looks like this amazing athlete, and he is.
And and just again, what he did in the NBA with triple doubles too, it's just
amazing. For the longest time, people were talking about Oscar Robertson's triple double season and the triple double over the 5 seasons, and that was seen as I swear I think some people said that they could see Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point in a single game record being broken before Oscar Robertson's triple-double record, or triple-double in a season. And that proved to be absolute garbage because Russell Westbrook did 3 freaking times.
Yeah, and let's see.
Obviously, things have changed, and it's a lot more high usage basketball, and everything along those lines. It seems like the best players are putting up these triple doubles on a nightly basis, but it's still so impressive that Russell Westbrook does it, and he's still his nose for the ball is amazing. I forget which coach it was, but I remember some coach was saying they talked to Larry Brown that year, and Larry Brown was saying how much he loved. I think it might have been Billy Kennedy, and Larry Brown was saying how much he loved Westbrook, and Billy Kennedy's we played him and we didn't even have him on the game plan, and that was earlier in the year, but still. And then Russell ends up, you could early in their career, it looked like Derrick Rose was kind of like the cream of the crop of that draft. But yeah, Russell, just durability, with his best seasons and everything like that, has certainly topped that.
Yeah, I think Rose, like injuries obviously derailed him, but yeah, like now you don't even put him on the same level.
No.
But where for a while, yeah, of course, like Rose, like was single-handedly leading Chicago, whereas Russell was playing with Durant and like those kind of things. But now it's like
Yeah.
different echelons. The other player, obviously,
I think a huge reason if Houston's small ball wins out, it's like Russell would be a huge reason because you can like play him basically like at the 4.
Yeah,
the guy's just
he's that big, he's that athletic, and he can still rebound, and you're not like liable.
Oh, then him like pushing on the break, like yeah.
And then of course the other player that we love in this draft is just someone that we watched a lot since high school, and that's Kevin.
He might be the second best player in this draft.
Yeah, and he just I will always tell people when they're like,
UCLA, man, crushed it.
I've seen in high school in those situations was Kevin Love. I remember one game in the state tournament he played Westview, and Westview had a center at the time that was committed to Gonzaga. Ended up like that didn't really, it didn't really go anywhere for him. But I remember Kevin missed like one shot at like the beginning of the game, and then that was it. He didn't miss another 3-pointer, free throw, anything. Like just
they were in different worlds.
Just throwing outlets.
Andy Pauling was taller than Kevin Love. That was it.
That was it. But no, just to see him like he could hit it, like he could throw it like cross court and like literally hit a thimble at the other side of the floor. Like he was just so accurate as a passer.
Those outlet passes were insane back
then. Just to see him, like even at UCLA, he looked a little chunkier. And then to see like the shape that he got.
No, I actually think he had gotten into better shape since high school at UCLA.
But like the shape that he ended up transforming himself into for the
NBA. The NBA is like it's crazy. Like the two guys who I think of like of transforming their bodies from college to the pros, I think of Kevin Love and I think of Draymond Green.
Yeah. No, totally. And Kevin he's one of those guys.
It's prolonged his career. Like he's had injury issues as well, but it's prolonged his career. And certainly helped make him like just crazy player. The thing I always loved about him is just like his positioning and nose for the ball as a rebounder too.
Oh,
and, I really thought like I was surprised that UCLA didn't win the title that year. They were my choice from the beginning of the. I usually pick a team at the beginning of the year, and UCLA was the choice. I was sticking with it, and Memphis, screwed me.
Yeah.
But then they could have the two best players from that draft. Like that's the amazing part. Like I don't think they went 4th and 5th, but people didn't necessarily see that coming.
Totally. So now we're moving on to the final draft of the decade, and this one actually has like some pretty good star power when you think about it.
Damn right.
Blake Griffin is the number 1 pick. Talked about him last week. Great career. Definitely not the best player in this draft.
No.
You got this DeMar DeRozan from SC. Has a strong freshman year. Really good player. Not the best player in this draft.
No.
You got this kid from Arizona State who doesn't has a little bit of facial hair, but doesn't really have like this full bushy beard yet. James Harden. He's good. Close to the best player in the draft. But then you have this guy, and I remember when he got drafted, he's from a small school. I remember Michael used to always do a running blog during the drafts. Like he would just write down his thoughts and he would like email it to like me. And I don't even know if he emailed it to anybody else. And he goes, when Golden State,
and I'm glad I didn't.
It made Mark Jackson look like a smart guy because the guy he drafted looks like Taj Mowry from the show Smart Guy. And that was a young baby face.
And that's not even true. Like that's the other thing. Like
not even true, but either way, he looks like a boy genius because he looks like a kid. Babyface, Stephen Curry. That is the best player in this draft. Harden is maybe very close.
Yeah, I think.
Edge out to Steph. Yeah.
If Harden ends up leading a team to championships, and people can say that about Steph, like, oh, he's never won Finals MVP. Come on, the team was built around Stephen Curry.
Yeah, but
and
Stephen Curry
not everybody revolutionizes basketball. Okay?
Yeah.
Not everybody is the best shooter in NBA history. Okay.
A generation he makes more threes in a year than like the former, 20 years ago career leaders. Yeah. Career record holders like Steph does that in like a single season. Like I think like whatever Dale Ellis had. And I remember he was like the 3-pointing threshold in like the 90s.
Yeah.
Steph does in a year.
Yeah, I just think Stephen Curry's like the 5-year peak that he had was absolutely unreal. Amazing. And he
Well, the thing is, I think he'll come back next season. Is like,
oh yeah,
Golden State's going to get a good pick. Will they trade it, sell it, whatever? But that's going to, keep them in a good, position to still be good. You got Clay, you got Draymond. That's like the 3 right now. Do they keep Wiggins? Like they still have potential to make those runs.
yeah. I think they have a number of good seasons in front of them, and like Harden is definitely my runner-up, and then it would be Blake Griffin after that. But yeah, Stephen Curry has he's a top 15 or so player in NBA history, and some people feel like he's knocking on the door of top 10. Just some unreal seasons. So dangerous. Like it's just the amount of ways he can hurt you too. And if you talk about the best off-ball movers in NBA history, he's certainly has to be up there. Like he can do it on ball, he can do it off ball, and his off ball is so dangerous. He just is always moving, and that's why I say to anybody who is studying the game and wants to be a part of it, I think people look at the on ball stuff and see Steph doing those things before the game and those dribbling workouts and everything, and do that for sure. But also look at how he moves without the ball, because that is the reason why he's the revolution.
Totally.
Yeah.
And even with the ball, with his dribbling though, it's he, we talked about Chris Paul earlier. Great player, great defender. He's put Chris Paul on skates. He's had those kind of things he's done.
He put Kawhi Leonard on skates.
Yeah, he's definitely crossing people, have broken some ankles in his day.
Yeah.
I would give him the nod over Harden now, because Harden still needs to take that.
I give him the nod over Harden by quite a bit.
Finals point. Harden also, but he's done so much as a scorer and just getting.
When you rank all-time players though, because Harden still hasn't.
Yeah, done
and
that.
You could say I think people are a little bit too hard on Harden's playoff resume and everything like that, because you need to look at how close they came to beating the Warriors in a couple of years, and I feel that almost is them being the finals runner-up during those years. But yeah, it's still you can talk about Steph's defense and everything there. I think Steph's a smarter team defender than James Harden.
Yeah, but then if you talk about James Harden's defense, it's even worse. So
Yeah.
There's definitely plenty of videos.
That's what I'm saying. James Harden. The one thing James Harden is pretty good at is post defense. He's super strong, and he had a few moments at the game the other night where he when they made those comebacks, he did some things on defense to get them there these past couple games. And he'll have his moments, but then he has these huge highlight clips of him just not caring. And you always have to take that into context. And he's so freaking good as a scorer and on offense in general, where you just kind of are willing to look past that in many ways. But he is, Stephen Curry is just probably the best shooter in NBA history.
No, definitely.
When you take everything into account, he's crazy. He does it at such a high volume and with such efficiency. And I'm looking at his measurements from the combine. And
because he was a Davidson, he shot the lights out too, but it was again, small school.
Oh man, yeah.
So how does
him and Davidson? Oh, and the other thing I wanted to touch on is I was looking at it. The thing I went back and looked at was what Virginia Tech's lineup looked like when Steph was a freshman.
His father's alma mater that didn't give him the love. Seth
Greenberg was the head coach of Virginia Tech. Now the rumor was that he offered a scholarship or something or didn't. It's been a lot of back and forth there. They did have a guy who was RSCI top 100 as a point guard who plays only 1 year at Virginia Tech and doesn't do very much during that year. And then the other two freshmen were bigs. But you really like, obviously hindsight's 2020, and like you don't know the exact circumstances. And maybe Steph just liked the opportunity Davidson more. He thought he could play more there. He comes into college and like is an immediate contributor. Yes, at Davidson, and they're like in the SoCon at the time. But he's just a crazy shooter right off the bat. And he wasn't Stephen Curry. Like I know he wasn't Stephen Curry.
But
He certainly like Stephen Curry is not a physically imposing player either. Like
totally.
he's not a crazy athlete. He's not physically imposing. His combine numbers: 6'2" without shoes, 6'3.5" wingspan, 181 pounds, 8'1" standing reach. And Stephen Curry is not like this high level like vertical athlete.
Yeah.
For real. But it seems like he just really knew the game. Like that's the thing that you have to look at. And like the intangibles and like the intel like off the court must have been amazing.
Because his dad was
is that something that you're looking at seriously back then? Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, so his freshman year, good. His sophomore year, amazing. It like goes on this crazy NCAA tournament run also, and they beat Kansas. And yeah, like it's nuts. And then he comes back. I think he could have left after his sophomore year. Probably gets like people had concerns about him and like how he would. And at that point, he had never really like played point guard for Davidson. And then he comes back that next year and he plays more on the ball and plays more point guard. Has like a better assist to turnover ratio. It's still not like 2-1, but it's better. He is the focal, like this one team runs like basically like a box and two around him one game, or like they held him scoreless this one game, and the guy's going to be like, oh yeah, like they'll always remember we held Steph scoreless, and they lost by like 20 because he just kept passing to people and they were wide open. And so they remember that being a stupid way of guarding Stephen Curry. And like, good for you, you held him scoreless and still lost. Like, la-di-da. But yeah, he has an amazing score year there too. They don't make the NCAA tournament. I believe they're NIT. He shoots a little bit worse from three, but still is 38.7% and 87.6% from the line. He was always like in the mid 80s as a free throw shooter in college. And he was seen as, some people like, there's always a tweet that people go back to where this one guy lists like 8 point guards ahead of him or something, like, which was silly. And it certainly seemed like he was in line to be taken by either one of Minnesota's spots.
18 picks they used on point guards.
Yeah, exactly. And then they thought he thought he was going to New York. Like that's the team he was kind of hoping to go to.
And luckily for him,
yeah, I think he still would have been a stud.
Good. But, yeah. No, totally. Just
yeah. And then the thing that people also kind of forget is that Brandon Jennings gets off to this like crazy start in his rookie season, and
he's like a
Tyreek Evans wins the rookie of the year.
Yeah,
that's a crazy thing. He just has like really good numbers on a bad team, but like his numbers were crazy. Stephen takes a little while to get going, and I think Nelly was kind of like hesitant to play him at first. But I remember seeing him play against the Raptors later on in his rookie year and just being like, this guy looks like a stud. Like he looked so good. And he just insane touch around the basket too. The shooting, the ball handling, like the guy was an absolute bucket. And then I think he just worked on a lot of other aspects of his game, became this super unselfish player as well, has this huge threat of being able to score off the pull-up, off the catch, like just everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, just like, I think the range was always there, but like, then it just became like absolutely insane, the places he was pulling up from. And
And it's good to see
Yeah,
the decade end strong with such like whack drafts at the beginning, like 2000, 2001. I mean, 2002 for the most part, not that great. And then it's like at least 2009, you end with some like legit super.
2008 was seen as like the stud draft. Like that was a really good high, like it was a deep high school class. 2009, like I think it was seen as a good draft, but wasn't like seen as this like superstar upside draft. You had, as we said, like Blake Griffin was the number one pick, like bar none.
But you look at physically
If
Blake
you
Griffin
look
versus
at the
Steph.
time, but yeah, if you look at the time, Blake Griffin was going number one. James Harden was seen around that range, but wasn't necessarily locked to go number 3 either. And a great pick by Sam Presti as well. But yeah, we feel like Stephen Curry at number 7, best player in that draft. And it's going to be hard for even a player as great as James Harden, who has this insane scoring streak and has had this streak of MVP like runner-up seasons and like being in the top 5 voting there. Stefan's 2 years as MVP, so damn impressive, and he's the one unanimous MVP in NBA history. There were a couple seasons where it should have been, but then
Hey, that's
as we
what,
say, one guy ends up fucking it up. But
yeah, that's the way the ball. That's the way the ball bounces. But those were the the drafts from 2000 to 2009, the best players. If there's anyone you think we missed out on, or you think should be there, definitely let us know in the comments, or shoot us an email, viselandpod@gmail.com.
and I'm going to do the same thing I did last time and just read down who we felt the best players were in each draft. So in the 2000 draft, we feel it's Michael Redd. He went 43rd out of Ohio State, went 43rd to the Milwaukee Bucks. 2001, Pau Gasol from FC Barcelona was the 3rd pick for Atlanta, traded to Vancouver for Sharif Abdul-Rahim. 2002, Amari Stoudemire out of Cypress Creek High School in Orlando, Florida. 9th pick by the Phoenix Suns. 2003, LeBron James out of St. Vincent St. Mary in Akron, Ohio. And he is picked by the Cleveland Cavaliers. 2004, Dwight Howard. I don't have the high school that he went to, but out of high school. And he was the number 1 pick by the Orlando Magic. In 2005, Chris Paul out of Wake Forest, 4th pick by the New Orleans Hornets at the time, and they were New Orleans, Oklahoma City.
City, because they have Hurricane Katrina. Yeah.
Yeah, LaMarcus Aldridge in 2006, out of Texas, 2nd pick by the Chicago Bulls, traded to the Portland Trailblazers. 2007, Kevin Durant, he was the 2nd pick by the Seattle Supersonics. 2008, Russell Westbrook, he was the 4th pick by the same team but different city and team, Oklahoma City Thunder.
The Sonics at the draft, and then I think they changed like right after. But
I think they were leaning there.
Yeah. Like you never played in Seattle, but I think they were still technically called. Like it was so stupid.
Sure. And yeah,
think about that next time you drink Starbucks, Seattle fans.
Yeah, and in 2009, Stephen Curry out of Davidson, he went 7th to the Golden State Warriors, and he has an insane 5-year peak, and we're hoping it's still going.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Missed this year, like for the most part, but yeah, Stephen Curry is still a phenomenal player.
Turns out 2020 was a good year to kind of miss. So he's let him do his thing, get better, come back strong next season.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Viseland. You can follow me, NBA Draft Mikey B. You can follow Jason at J Visenberg. Follow us at Viseland, Viseland, on Twitter. And please rate, review, tell your friends, leave us some comments. Been happy to do this best player in each draft series. And we have an episode next week that I think will be very hindsight oriented and
But I
but
think
also like,
sparks good
give like some
discussion.
context to the time, and then be a lot of I think just what what's the word I want to use? It's a lot of I think it's just kind of like an interesting thing to think about, and that's what I'll leave there. Sorry for blathering on there, but yeah, Jason, end this episode the right way.
Perfect. Yeah. Everything echoing what he said. You could also shoot us an email at viselandpod@gmail.com. We got new episodes coming on Wednesdays, so definitely be the first to subscribe, and we will catch you next time.